There are two things that you really need to be doing to help keep your RV out of the shop. And that is, number one, operate it correctly, and number two, perform routine maintenance and inspections. Most people wouldn't dream of skipping an oil change on their vehicle. Most people wouldn't skip the annual maintenance on their HVAC system at home. So why do so many RVers just not know anything about their own rigs? So in today's video, we're gonna take a look at our top 5 do's and don'ts to keep your RV ready for that next camping trip. And we're not gonna talk about any specific components or appliances, but we are gonna take a look at some tips and some best practices so that you can become more familiar with your rig, so that you can identify those potential issues before you get set on that next adventure. Okay, so let's start off with our top 5 do's that every RVer should be doing. So do number 1 is be familiar with all of the systems and components and appliances in your RV. You don't need deep technical knowledge on any of these things, but you do need to be familiar with them. For example, do you have an inverter in your rig? Do you know what it does? Do you know what it looks like when it's operating normally? Would you recognize when this thing's not working right? I just worked on a rig this morning where the owner had absolutely no idea how this thing works. So let's think about your own body for a second. You don't need a medical degree to know when you have a fever, because you know what normal feels like. You know what that baseline is. And it's the same way with your RV. Now, you don't need to know how to rebuild a surge protector. You don't need to know how to troubleshoot a circuit board, but you must know the basics, like what does the water pump sound like when it's running? And what color is that flame supposed to be on your cooktop in your kitchen? If you don't know what normal looks or sounds like for every component or system in your rig, then you're never gonna know when that component or that system is starting to fail. So what I'm saying here is that having a basic understanding of all of these things is gonna be your early warning system against catastrophic failures.
So let's look at the water pump, for example. Do you have any idea what it means if you hear it cycle on and off every few seconds, even though nobody's using any water? Spoiler alert, it's not good. Most RVers aren't familiar with their water pump, and so they don't know that that's an issue. So because they don't know that that's an issue, they don't realize that they need to spend, 10 minutes or so trying to find the problem, find the leak, to potentially avoid a huge repair bill later on due to extensive water damage.
Now, I realize that becoming familiar with your RV can be a little bit of a daunting task. It's kind of like going in and telling a toddler to clean up their bedroom after they've just spread every single toy that they have all over the floor. So where do we even begin? Well, in the Navy, we had this saying, RTFM, read the freaking manual. Now, guys, I understand that is a lot like asking for directions when you're lost, or asking the wife where the mustard is in the refrigerator because you can't find it. Hey dear, I think we're out of mustard. I can't find it anywhere.
Really?
Although maybe that last example isn't entirely accurate, because you and me both know that that mustard wasn't right there when you were in there looking for it. But the point here is that there really is a lot of good information inside of your owner's manual. So for example, just a quick example, if I wanted to do a little bit of troubleshooting on my range, right, in my kitchen, I can come over here and I can find my symptom here, which is the flames do not burn all around the cap. So it gives me the probable cause, and it gives me a way to fix that right inside of this manual. Another great example here is I kind of relatively recently did a video on how to operate your tankless water heater. Now, I see lots and lots of complaints about these tankless water heaters on the interwebs, and don't get me wrong, there's a lot that could be improved with these things, but the point here is that most of the complaints that I see with these tankless water heaters could be avoided if the owners would just read their manual about how those things are actually supposed to be operated. So if you're one of those people that's having problems with your tankless water heater, I'm gonna go ahead and link that video down in the description below. So these user manuals have got really a lot of good information in it. Everything from normal operation. What does normal operation look like? What kind of routine maintenance you should be doing on all of these items and all of these systems? And then again, as well as some basic troubleshooting steps that you can take on your own that can often fix many of the problems that you would otherwise call an RV technician to come out and fix. And even though we haven't been operating very long as a mobile RV service business, I have been in several customers' rigs where all I did was go in and just perform something straight out of one of the user's manuals. And I hate when that happens, and I hate charging customers for that, but that's just the reality of it. I went to their site, I did the work. Sure, it came right out of the manual, and it's a tough pill to swallow for the customer, but that's what I gotta do. All right, next on our list of top 5 do's that every RV owner should be doing is to put together a list of maintenance items and get them on a schedule. So when you're going through those user manuals, find the section that talks about maintenance and inspections and take note of how often those items need to be done. Then all you gotta do is just get them on your calendar. For example, your air conditioners, those things need to be cleaned and inspected at least annually. And then to go along with that, the filters that are in your AC units need to be either cleaned or replaced every 30 days. So the overall point here is that regular routine maintenance and inspections are gonna be key to keeping your RV up and running. So get all those things on a calendar, because if you don't, you're gonna forget about these things, and then eventually these things will start to break. And you know what? It's okay if you don't wanna do it yourself. And if that's the case, just hire an RV technician to do it. Not everybody is willing and or able to do all of these maintenance items, and that's fine. All right, number 4 on our list of do's is to identify trusted, reliable sources outside of the owner's manual. Owner's manuals are a great start when something breaks. And as much as we encourage you to read and understand them, we also recognize that they aren't a comprehensive guide for figuring out what's wrong when something doesn't work. They can't be, and that's okay. So what do you do when you have a problem that's not in the owner's manual? Well, the first place I'd start is the manufacturer's website. For example, Lippert, which is the company that makes just about everything in your RV, has some great how-to videos on their website. I'm a certified technician, and I've taken several of their official training classes, but I still find myself on their website when something goes wrong. Many manufacturers have how-to videos that go way beyond any kind of documentation that was provided with your RV when you bought it. Well, that's assuming that you got any documentation when you bought it. There are also a lot of YouTube channels, just like this one, that also have a ton of invaluable, real life-saving videos about how to fix not only the most common issues, but also those really obscure problems. I would caution here, however, to make sure you vet the information that you're getting from those YouTube videos, because there's a lot of bad information out there. Cross-reference a few videos to see what others are doing, and if something doesn't look or sound right, swipe left. And one final tip here is to look ahead. You need to realize that at some point, your furnace is gonna stop working, or your AC. So find a couple of resources you trust and bookmark them. You'll be glad you did when you wake up on a cold morning and it's 50 degrees in your rig because your furnace stopped in the middle of the night. And our final tip on our list of do's is to just get help when you need it. Don't bite off more than you can chew, because if you do, you're gonna get angry and you're gonna get frustrated, and you're potentially just going to make the situation worse, which when you end up having to call a professional like myself, it's just gonna cost you that much more money. And whatever that threshold is for you, it's fine. If that furnace goes out in the middle of the night and you want to attack it with a couple of YouTube videos on your own, so be it. If you want to immediately call a professional, then that's fine as well. Just don't go off the deep end and start jerry-rigging a bunch of stuff. For example, I just had a job this morning where half the outlets in the customer's rig weren't working. And before I could get over there and really dig in to see what was going on, the customer had already replaced one of his outlets and really miswired everything. So it took me just a little bit to figure out what was going on with that, because this was someone who was doing some work in his rig that he really didn't understand, and just made things a little bit more difficult for me when I came to fix it. And one of the best resources that you have at your fingertips when you just can't figure out the problem is rvhelp.com. So if you just go to that website, enter your current location, it will give you a list of all certified technicians in your specific area. All right, so now let's move on to our list of don'ts. Okay, don't number one. One of the worst things you can do in an RV is ignore those strange noises and terrible odors. Nothing in your RV should sound like it's about to eat itself, and nothing should smell foul, ever. Well, maybe on a really hot day when you flush the toilet, especially when you've got the exhaust fan going, that's kind of unavoidable. I mean, you are opening a direct path to the poop tank and then sucking that air out with the vent fan, right? But hey, even knowing that bit of information is helpful, right? Turn the fan off, at least temporarily, before you flush. You can thank me later. But the point here is that if something smells or sounds off, that's your RV's way of telling you something's wrong. For example, in our last video, we talked about several things that can affect your Schwintek slide outs. If one of those slides is making a strange noise when you operate it, would you even recognize it? What's it supposed to sound like? And far too often, RVers ignore these early warning signs, just hoping it's gonna go away. Spoiler alert, the only way that slide's gonna stop making noises is when it gets stuck at the most inconvenient time, like when it's raining cats and dogs outside and you need to get on the road. We've got some friends who like to describe the RV life as being all about what's that noise, what's that smell, and where's that water coming from. I don't think I've ever heard a more accurate description of RV life. Your RV will talk to you when it's sick. You just need to listen and to be able to recognize the symptoms. All right, don't number two is don't abuse your rig. One good example of that I see on Facebook far too often is people using harsh chemicals like bleach in their black tank. They'll pour that down the toilet thinking that it's gonna clean out their black tank. Guess what? That's not what it does. The only thing that does is eat away at the seals on those dump valves, and it also kills all of that bacteria that's in that black tank that's gonna break down all of the solids. So if you're gonna use chemicals in your black tank, stick to the ones that are made for RV black tanks. Another good example is leaving these awnings out when it's windy outside. These things are like big sails, and it doesn't take much of a gust to just completely rip these things off. It happens way more than you probably think. And even if you don't get that big breeze that just totally rips this thing off, over time, the seam on the fabric is just gonna slowly start to come apart. And when it finally does, you're probably gonna wonder, why did the manufacturer make such a terrible product? On to our number three don't, and that is don't jerry rig anything unless you're in a pinch and you have no other alternatives. If you're jerry rigging something, it's likely because you don't have the means or the knowledge to fix it yourself. And that's okay. But it also means you probably don't know that jerry rigging it is likely to make the problem worse. And when that RV tech is finally able to come look at it for you, you've just doubled the amount of work they need to do to get you back on the road, which in turn is gonna cost you more money. Now, we're not saying that you can't come up with creative temporary solutions for complicated problems. Heck, in one of the videos we did just a few weeks ago, we showed one method of removing a Schwintek slide motor that you won't find in any of Lippert's documentation. But there are so many pieces and parts and systems in your rig that are interrelated that you really need to understand how they all work together before you turn your problem into a bona fide custom-built disaster. Although those do tend to make pretty good campfire stories. Next on our list of don'ts is don't get in a rush. And when I say don't get in a rush, I mean don't get in a rush with anything. On travel days, use your checklist. You don't necessarily need to have that checklist in your hand while you're making all of your travel preps, but you need to make sure you verify everything's done on your checklist before you hit the road. The first time you forget to complete that checklist, all because you got in a rush, will be the first time that you forget to bring that awning in before you hit the road. It sounds crazy, but it happens. And don't be in a rush to get to your destination. These rigs, especially the suspension, are not built to be hauled down the road at 80 miles an hour. That's a good way to throw a leaf spring or blow a tire. I just watched a YouTube video a few days ago, and I'm not gonna name the channel name, where both shocks on one axle of their MORryde independent suspension fell off while driving down the highway. Now, the owners decided to move on down the road, which in itself may not have been a problem, but they continued to drive down the road at 70 to 75 miles an hour, and that is just asking for more trouble. Keep the speeds down and give your rig a fighting chance. 65 miles an hour is plenty fast enough to get you from point A to point B. And our final tip here on our list of don'ts is, please, whatever you do not rely on the Facebook mafia when something goes wrong with your rig. I can guarantee you that you're gonna get polar opposites for your answers and everything in between. The right answer might be buried somewhere in those comments, but how do you know which one is the right answer? Not only that, but just merely breathing when you ask a question on Facebook is an invitation for people to just line up to start roasting you. You don't need that. Most of the answers that you get on Facebook are just flat out wrong, and many times they can hurt your rig even more in the long run. We've seen a lot of dumb on these Facebook groups. And going back to the wheel lug nuts, because that's a really good example, something we see all the time. People ask, what do I need to be torquing my wheel lug nuts down to? And we've seen all kinds of answers, everything from just give it a few good ugga-duggas with your impact gun, all the way to, you don't really need to worry about that, just hit the road. Well, both of those scenarios are a really good way to lose a wheel going down the highway. And again, that happens way more often than you probably think it does. So while we're not opposed to finding help on the interwebs, Facebook is just by far the worst resource that you can use out there because everybody's got the right answer, but nobody's got the right answer. We all know that people don't like to admit when they're wrong, especially when they've screwed something up. But hey, we all make mistakes, especially with these RVs. So if you've done something dumb out there simply because you didn't know any better, maybe you broke something and it cost you just a small fortune to fix it, drop those comments down below and let's all just learn from each other's mistakes. Now, we're not trying to say that you're gonna be the cause of everything in your RV that breaks, but there are far too many people out there who just don't know anything about their rigs. And then they wonder why they threw a leaf spring when they're 3,000 pounds overweight and they're flying down the highway at 75 or 80 miles an hour. And then they turn around and blame the manufacturers because they made crappy leaf springs. What we are saying is that you can avoid a lot of heartache out there if you just know the basics about your RV. Routine inspections and maintenance and operating it properly is going to help keep your rig out of the shop and getting you down the road to your next adventure. So we hope you got something out of this video. If you did, make sure you hit that like button down there. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. And then while you're there, hit that bell button so that you're notified of all of our future videos. And until that future video, happy camping and stay safe out there.